birthday. I was hoping someday you'd be on your way to bed.
Well, hi, everybody. The Bali mama, back then it's when I had my 8 husbands, so I'm not sure which one was the father, but actually I do know. It was Laurie Hamill. He was the Bali papa, and we actually gave birth to Bali in the Wiki Wacky Woods up in the Poconos, and I put out the word to the SVN community who would like to come and work on the idea of localization, and we called it the Local Network Initiative at the time. And Jerry Gourdet drove his good food camper up from Virginia full of organic food, and he and Reed Glidden, who's here somewhere, organized all the meals, and Richard Pearl was the facilitator, and Elena Larner, who's here from Los Angeles, who I haven't seen in years, was there. Martha Shaw, where are you, Martha? She was there. Just about 20 SVNers, Steve and Patricia Blessman and Lisa Gravitt. So many of us worked together to birth Bali. Let's see, I gotta learn to use this clicker here. You might think I look a lot younger in that picture, but here, whoops, wrong way. Let's see. How does this work? Oh, there I am. There I'm even younger. Around 9 or 10 years old, and around that time, I was a very good baseball player because I was the oldest child, and my dad taught me how to play. And I was very excited in 5th grade when the gym teacher said, okay, we're gonna start softball practice today. And I was leaping out of my chair, I even had my own mitt and everything. And then he said, okay, all the guys down to the field, girls, you go over there and practice cheerleading somewhere. And I was very chest-fallen. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know enough to object. Of course, nowadays I'd be sued for saying something like that. But at the time, I refused to cheerlead, but I stood behind the backstop and watched the guys play. And it was an experience for me that really taught me the destructive nature of discrimination, because I bought into the idea that girls were second class, and there was a lot of things telling me the same thing back then in the 50s, and so I had contempt for other girls that took me a long time to get over, and self-contempt just for being a girl, and I did the 1950s thing. I decided that, okay, if I can't play baseball, I'll marry the best baseball player. So I decided that day who that would be, and because he was not only a good hitter, but a good pitcher too, and that's unusual in baseball. And so I decided who I would marry. I went back to my desk. I took out my tablet, crossed off Judy Wicks on the tablet, and wrote Mrs. Richard Hayne all over my tablet. And of course, that's who I ended up marrying when we graduated from college. But back in the 50s, girls were taught to have a life of service. We were going to be mothers and wives, and so we were taught to cook and sew. I wanted to take shop because my favorite hobby was building forts up in the woods. So I wanted to learn how to use tools, but I wasn't allowed because I was a girl, so I had to take home ec, and I said, I will never cook. I will never sew. But then as I grew, and I realized that when I became a business person, that the purpose of business is actually to serve. So all those things that I rejected as a child, I didn't want to do anything about nurturing and caring and all this kind of stuff, service schmervice, I wanted to do the cool stuff like the boys. But then I realized that when I had my own company, that it was my feminine qualities that were needed and what I really relied on. And when I talk about feminine qualities, I mean those qualities that are inherent to both men and women. And so much of in our economy, our feminine values are repressed. Our feminine energies are repressed. And I started learning that at a very young age. And a lot of my book is about how we, as men and women both, can bring feminine and masculine energy into balance. Let's see, what happens next? Okay, after we graduated from college, it was during the Vietnam War in 1969, and we Mrs. Richard Hayne, Mr. and Mrs. Richard Hayne, decided to sign up for VISTA, and we were sent to live in an Eskimo village in Alaska. And I remember, I think yesterday it was Don Morton that was talking about how we need to learn indigenous wisdom. And that was certainly a huge lesson for me. The rest of my life was really informed by this year of living with indigenous people in Alaska, Chapornik, Alaska, population 100, and a very remote place. We had to fly in there. This is a seal party. One morning, a woman came knocking on my door, and she said, seal party, seal party. And I followed her to find out that the tradition is that after a long, hard winter, when a man catches his first seal, his wife has a seal party, and she invites all the families over to their house, and they divide the seal meat and the blubber and so on between all the families. And then anything else that the family has accumulated during the year that they don't need, they also distribute to the other families. And then in contemporary times, they augment that by throwing candy into the yard. And this is the picture of the women catching candy in their skirts. But the Eskimos had no concept of accumulating more than is needed, and they had no concept of envy. If you admire something an Eskimo has, if I said, Deb, that red shawl is so attractive, I like that. If you were an Eskimo, you'd take it off and give it to me. But please don't, no. You are such a good Eskimo. You gotta watch what you say to Eskimos. You know. So, but anyway, thank you, Deb. I like this. I really do. So it made me look at my own culture and realize how we actually create envy. Advertising creates envy, that you want to wear what the models are wearing, or the makeup, or whatever, or the macho guys, smoke that cigarette, drink that beer, whatever. And that we actually reward greed, and we admire the most as a culture those who accumulate the most, the ones who hoard the most, the number of cars or houses or wardrobe or whatever. But yet the Eskimos were the happiest people I've ever known because their happiness and their security did not depend on money. Their happiness and security depended on community. So it was from the Eskimos that I learned, here's a culture that has lasted literally thousands and thousands of years, and it's a culture that, in an economy that's based on sharing and cooperating rather than on competing and hoarding. And that was a lesson that I never forgot. Meanwhile, when we came back from Alaska, I did have to put all those ideas in the back of my mind, because what we needed right away was jobs. And we realized that we were too independent to work for anybody, so we decided we would start a business. And when I was a little kid, I had a store. I would make things on scraps of wood. I would paint them and put them in my wagon and take them down to the highway and sell them. And so I said to my husband, we should start a store. It's really easy. You just you buy something at one price and you sell it for a higher price. That's all there is to it. So he said, okay, all right, let's go. So we were visiting a friend. We were living in a small town. We grew up in a small town of Ingomar in western Pennsylvania. And going to Philadelphia was like, going to the big city. And so we went to visit a friend that was a student at Wharton, and we told him about our idea. And he said, you should start that store around Penn, because there's no student stores. And so we found a storefront. It was called the Free People Store, next to a very popular delicatessen called Koch's. That's a picture of the front of the store. I got this long pair of underwear and put the open sign in the back of the underwear there. And there's a Bob Dylan record. It was a very hip store. We started with $3,000, which was our stipend from Vista. We got $1,500 each as a stipend from working in Vista. And we decorated the store with these crates. We went on garbage day to Chinatown and got these wooden crates that products are shipped in from China, gathered them all up, and I put my fort building skills to use and built these things. I hammered them all together myself and painted them different colors, but you can see we had all kinds of hippie stuff. The store, the concept of the store, because we really didn't know anything, I said, well, why don't we just have a general store for people our age? We used to say you can't trust anybody over 30. So we said, well, we won't sell to anyone over 30. So that we had all this hip stuff, candles and ceramics and dangly earrings and mattress bedspreads and frisbees and all the cool stuff, all made out of, and my husband Dick found out that records were just the right size that would fit into these, Chinese boxes. So he made the record bin here, and that was our lost leader. We sold records for $2.75 a piece. That was slightly below cost to get the students to come into the store and then buy more of our stuff. There's the sign, the Free People's Store. That's a picture of me with some hippie dresses. So after about two years, I found that the characteristics of my husband that when I chose him that day on the softball field became oppressive as I got a little bit older. And all of a sudden I decided, whatever happened to that little girl named Judy Wicks who always crossed off my tablet? I don't want to be Mrs. Richard Haney anymore. So I left. And we lived in the store because we couldn't afford to rent an apartment and a store, both. So we lived in the back of the store. So I was leaving my home, my business, my first marriage. I got a half a block away. I went through a red light, and it was an accident. No one was hurt, thank goodness. But a fellow came along and said, "Can I help you home?" And I said, "No, I can't go home. I've just left my husband. My bags are packed. I've got to keep going. I've wrecked my car, and now I have to find a job really fast to repair my car." And he said, "Well, I work in a restaurant, and they have an opening for a waitress." I said, "I'll take it." So when people said, "How did you get in the restaurant business?" I said, "By accident." So, so I got into the restaurant business. My husband, when I left, he changed the name of the store to Urban Outfitters. He's still the CEO there. My life took a very different path. So this is the 3400 block of Sansom Street. The restaurant that the fellow on the street told me about was on this block, a restaurant called La Trosse. I started there as a waitress, and there's a whole chapter on that. But anyway, got to the point where I started the White Dog Cafe in 1983, originally just as a muffin shop on the first floor of my house. I lived there for 10 years and then started the muffin shop. I had very little money. I left the restaurant that I started out as a waitress. I became the general manager and became a partner in the business. And then I had a falling out with my partner and left. And I was not having good luck with men. Anyway, I started the White Dog on the first floor of my house. Married to a really nice guy, my second husband, Neil Schlosser, the father of my children. And I started as a muffin shop and started then making soup and bread. Those are the two things I learned to make when I was in the Eskimo village, so I broke that rule that I'd never cook, just once, to make soup and bread for a few months until I could work up to hire somebody else. The dishwasher was just a 3-bowl sink, and first it was just a takeout shop, but then we put some tables in the back. The 3-bowl sink was right in the corner, so that when you finished your plates, you would pass them, dirty plates, over to the dishwasher, who washed them right there in the dining room. Our first turnout kitchen was in the backyard, because I couldn't afford to put the exhaust fan up all the way up to our house. So I put a charcoal grill in the backyard, and the waiters would come out the back door to pick up the food to bring it inside and so on. And then in the winter, we enclosed it with plastic, and the chef wore a parka and gloves out there. If you had to use the restroom, you were pointed the way up to our house, where you would wave at my kids, Grace and Lawrence. Here's my son, Lawrence, right there. He survived this, So you'd go to the bathroom. You wave to Grace and Lawrence as you made your way to the family bathroom, because we didn't have any bathrooms in the restaurant. Anyway, it grew and grew and grew. And there's Grace and Lawrence. Raised my kids in the workplace. So when you live and work in the same community, you have the same values at work as you do at home. And sometimes in business schools, they tell you to leave your values at home. But for me, it was the golden rule that I practiced at home was the same rule that I used at work. Where some places it's the golden rule at home, and then when you go to work, gold rules. When you see every day the people affected by your business decisions, your customers, your neighbors, your employees, the environment in which you live, you tend to make decisions from the heart as well as from the head. And there's many examples of this. I know I'm already running out of time, but this is this example is about paying a living wage, and on the right is Greg Coleman. He was one of our dishwashers, and this was in Cuba. Actually, we were visiting our sister restaurant in Cuba, and the woman on the right was the Cuban dishwasher, and he said he wanted to go in the kitchen and help her wash the dishes. So she's a pretty cute dishwasher. Anyway. Greg was not making a living wage. I heard about the living wage from Ben & Jerry's. When I first heard about it, I thought, gee, I can't pay restaurant workers an entry level of a living wage, which was $8 at the time. And our dishwashers were making maybe $6.50 or $7. So all of a sudden I was in the kitchen one day, and Greg looked up at me, and Brian and Tyrone, 3 young men that were not making a living wage, and all of a sudden the light bulb went off in my head. And I thought, my gosh, I don't want anyone who works for me 40 hours a week not to be able to pay their rent and buy their food and so on, so we installed the living wage. Here's another example. I heard about renewable energy. We had already started doing programs on climate change at the White Dog, but I wasn't motivated to make a change. Pennsylvania was deregulated along with California so that you could buy renewable energy. I knew about it, but I didn't do anything until I went up to the Poconos, where the Wiki Wacky Woods, and I was walking through the woods and saw the stress that the woods was in. The creek was all dried up. The leaves were falling off the trees in August and so on, and all of a sudden I got it. This is what climate change is going to be like. I felt the woods. I felt the fear of fire in the air, and I went over and hugged a tree and became a tree hugger, and went back to Philadelphia, and the White Dog became the first business in Pennsylvania to buy 100% of our electricity from renewable sources. But that was because of my relationship, my firsthand relationship with the woods. Another example, I'm running out of time. Okay. I'm standing by my red light, and I'm by a high school, watching the kids come out of the high school, and I'm thinking to myself, this is my local public high school, and I don't know these kids. My kids would go here, except that I send them to private Quaker schools. Who are these kids? I wanted to know them, so I went to the principal, and we set up a mentoring program for kids who wanted to go into the hospitality business. This is a picture of our first class of kids from the high school out at a farm. We took them around to the farms to show them where food came from, and they're enjoying some celery or whatever. But I finally figured out who those kids were that I saw coming out of the school. They're our kids. All kids are our kids. And we had this program for about 15 years. So another issue for me was this whole idea of growing. When I first came to SVN, the strategy was, how can we grow our socially responsible companies bigger and bigger and bigger so they can compete with the bad companies and prove that socially responsible companies can be profitable. And so when I came, people would say, well, gee, you've got a successful business. How about opening one in New York? How about opening one in Washington, D.C.? And at first I thought I was a big sissy because I didn't want to do that. But then I realized that if I were to do a chain like that I would give up what was most important to me, and that's the authentic relationships with the people around me that I worked with and for, and that's what business was really about for me. It's about relationships. And so for me, it was about maximizing relationships rather than maximizing profit. So I figured that rather than doing another White Dog in someone else's community, I would do a black hat. So that was our retail store next door that sold, in some ways, it's sort of a sophisticated free people's store, I guess. So we sold locally made and fair trade goods and things made from recycled parts and whatnot. Another great example of this is Zingerman's Deli. Instead of doing a chain of delis, they looked to see, what does my community need? What don't we have? And start that business. So they started a creamery to make their own ice cream and cheese and yogurt. They started a bakery. They started a coffee roasting company. And each time they started another business, they made some of their employees, their best employees, partners. So they were creating more owners as well. And so that's what I saw was happening at SVN, that even what Greg talked about today, and Dab, about how even our most socially responsible companies are growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and then being sold to multinationals. And that's creating fewer owners. We're supposed to be creating more owners. If we're going to have social justice, we have to have more owners. Like what Gar was talking about the other day, we have to decentralize ownership. We need to find out how to have more owners and grow in new ways. So after the White Dog got it to a sustainable size of We sat 200 people as a restaurant, had our store. We were in 5 consecutive brown houses with brown stone row houses with an addition off the back, $5 million in sales, 100 employees. I decided that I didn't want to grow physically anymore, that the social responsible business community was using the old paradigm to measure success, continual growth. And I didn't want to do that. So I thought, how other ways can we grow? And I decided that I would grow deeper in my own community and start programs to expand consciousness, to increase knowledge, to develop relationships, to build community, to have more fun. So we had table talks. We had storytellings. This is underrepresented voices telling their stories. This is a gay couple and lesbian couple talking about same-sex marriage. A tour to prisons, affordable housing tour, a community garden tour, Martin Luther King dinner that we did every year for 26 years, a Freedom Seder, a pajama party brunch where everyone came wearing the pajamas on New Year's Day. This family wore matching pajamas every year. We made different ones each time. This is one of my favorite events. We had all these street parties, Noche Latina, Rum and Reggae, Bastille Day. This is the Liberty and Justice for All ball, and I did a little skit called Birth of a Nation that starts off after dinner with a Revolutionary War drummer. Then I come as a pregnant colonial woman with my midwife. There I am in the back. George Washington slept here. So she helps me into my bed, my red, white, and blue bed. She gets the audience, 1, 2, 3, everybody says push. Under the covers, I push my beach ball down through a hidden hole in the bed. Then my midwife, there's the first twin. There's the second twin being born. Liberty, justice. Then they do a tap dance to Yankee Doodle Dandy on the stage. Okay. Then we, back up, out. No, too fast. Then we wheel out the Statue of Liberty. There's Grace when she's a little girl. Then we sing God Bless America and light our sparklers. So, and this is the kind of fun we need to have. I mean, we're taught that we have to spend a lot of carbons and a lot of dollars to go to faraway places, exotic places to have fun. But we can have fun in our own communities, and I never had more fun than dancing in the street and looking around and seeing my employees and my friends and my family and my neighbors all having a good time together in the city streets. Sort of like the way we do what we're going to do tonight if I hurry up and finish this. So another a program that was really important to us was our International Sister Restaurant Program, Table for 6 Billion, please. This is our sister restaurant in Vietnam. One of the most important sister restaurants for me was in Chiapas, and I was really curious to find out why did the Zapatistas have their revolution on the day that NAFTA went into effect, January 1st, 1994. Because they knew, and Dolores talked about this last night, the Zapatistas knew that if we did away with the trade barriers, that U.S. corporations are subsidized with our tax money from the Farm Bill would dump cheap corn into Mexico and put out of business the Mexican farmers, corn farmers. And so that's why they had their revolution, nonviolent revolution. So after at the beginning, I just took customers down there to find out what was going on. But after the Actial massacre, I was really motivated to do more. So I organized what I called BETHRIC, Businesses for Ethical Trade and Human Rights in Chiapas, and I got out my SVN directory to find out who was doing business in Mexico, and that's how I met Rick Stewart, the founder of Frontier Natural Products. That's him on the far right. Talked him into going to Chiapas with me, and we formed this delegation, mostly of SVN people. There's Hal Tauzik in the front row. Went down and helped the Zapatistas by starting a coffee company and exported. Hal and I each loaned the Zapatistas $20,000 each to pre-finance the first harvest. And then after that, we did it for 2 years, and then after that, they were able to pre-finance their own cooperative and ended up selling 15 containers of coffee to Europe and the United States. But mostly we were trying to help them build a local economy because that's what was really in jeopardy. And what the Zapatistas were really upset about is they wanted to be self-reliant. They wanted to grow their corn as they had grown their corn for thousands of years. They wanted to keep their corporation and their culture intact and not become part of the global monoculture. They wanted to teach their children in their own languages with their own values. They wanted their women to be able to weave their clothes as they had been done for thousands of years instead of working in maquiladoras and be part of the global economy. So I realized that what was happening to the Zapatista indigenous people was happening to my farmers in Pennsylvania, Glen Brendel growing corn there, that the farm bill that subsidized the large corporations also were driving our farmers off the land and into corporate factory farms and corporate plantations. And that the call of the Zapatistas for local self-reliance was the call of people around the world, because we're all becoming dependent on large corporations to bring us our food, to bring us our energy, to bring us our clothes, our basic needs. That's putting us in great jeopardy, especially with climate change, not to be able to grow our own food. And so that was really the impetus for starting Bali. I got my vision really was a global one of envisioning a global economy that was made up of small to small win-win fair trade relationships around the world, such as the ones we were developing with the coffee for the Zapatistas. But each community would be self-reliant, as the Zapatistas wanted to be, as Gandhi envisioned for the villages of India, self-reliant in basic needs, but then trading globally on what we have excess and our special things, our special fashion, or our wine, or our cheese, or whatever. So, but I hadn't really figured out how to make this really go. At home, I was developing a network of farmers. Here's a farm we bought from on a brown field in inner city Philadelphia. I didn't want to be a part of this once I found out of the battery cages of chickens, so we found sources for pastured chicken. But I didn't know about the way that pigs are raised until I read John Robbins' book in the 90s, Died for New America, and found out this atrocious way that these mother pigs are kept in these cages where they can't take a step forward or backward or turn around, never go outside. Their manure goes into slots in the bottom of their cages that goes into a lagoon that goes on to pollute the soil and the air and the water in the rural communities. So they never have fresh air or feel sunshine. They're very social creatures that like to sleep in big pig piles, but here they never touch anyone. They're artificially inseminated. Their babies are taken away prematurely. Artificially inseminated, again, is that they're pieces of machinery, in a factory. But they're mammals, like us, like our dogs, with emotions and intelligence. They say that pigs are as smart as a 3-year-old child. So, I just could not believe, the situation that I thought was a violation of nature to treat mothers in this way, and a betrayal of our fiduciary duty to farm animals to care for them. And I realized that the pigs, the pork I was serving and the white dog must come from the system, because 95% of the pork in this country does. So I finally just walked into the kitchen and said, take all the pork off the menu. The bacon, the ham, the pork chops, we cannot be part of the system. So we soon found a farmer. This is an Amish farmer. This is a big old mother pig with her little babies in the nest. More pigs having a good time out in Lancaster County. I found out about the plight of the cow. I won't even go into the plight of the cow, but you all know about that. So we found grass-fed Black Angus. That's Dr. Bill, the rancher. That's Dougie Newbald, who says that when she kisses her goat's ears, it makes the goat cheese better. So I finally looked at my menu and thought, we've done it. We have a humane menu. All of our, unless you're a vegan, all of our poultry and meat, which I think is important. We started having a lot of vegetarian dishes after I found out about what was going on here. But decided to keep serving meat to try and educate meat eaters to demand that the meat that they eat comes from farms where the animals are treated with respect. So at first I thought, this is going to be our market niche. We're the only restaurant in Philadelphia that's doing this. This is our competitive advantage. This is all about us. And then my transformational moment came. And I thought to myself, well, if you really do care about the pigs, if you really care about the environment that's being polluted by the concentration of manure, if you really care about the workers in these horrible factory farms and slaughterhouses, if you care about the rural communities that are being destroyed by these corporate factory farms, if you care about the consumers that are eating this meat that's full of hormones and antibiotics, then rather than keeping this as your competitive advantage, you'll share your information with your competitors. So that was my moment that changed the rest of my life. And I realized that there is no such thing as one sustainable business. No matter how good our practices are, up until then I just thought, I'm just going to have as best practices as I can in my business. But then I realized that is not enough. That's not enough right now. That if we're going to build a just and sustainable economy, we have to share, we have to cooperate. And that is the only way that we're going to get anywhere. So just quickly, I started a nonprofit. I started putting 20% of my profits into White Dog Community Enterprises. Our Fair Food project was the first, and it was the job of the staff to go around to the restaurants and give them ideas, like a brochure of what all the farmers that we bought from with their phone numbers and so on. That's the Fair Food Farm Stand, the only all year-round, 7-day-a-week farm stand in Philadelphia indoors. It has local products year-round. I said to the farmer who was bringing us in 2 pigs a week, would you like to expand your business? He said, yes. I said, what's holding you back? And he said he needed $30,000 to buy a refrigerated truck. So I loaned him the money and he bought the truck. So now's the time for that pairing and sharing again. So the idea now is to turn to a partner and tell a story of a time that you've cooperated or shared. I'll tell you another little story just to give a second one, and that's Don Schaefer, and this is how we got to be friends. Don Schaefer's company, Comet Skateboard, developed a eco-friendly glue to glue the skateboards together. And instead of keeping that formula for their competitive advantage, he gave the formula out to all the other skateboard companies because he cared more about the environment than he did about having a competitive advantage. So if you would pick a partner and tell a story about sharing or cooperating that you've done in the past or that you can envision doing now in the future to build a more just and sustainable economy faster.